Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in. And I'm not so excited because I'm about to talk with someone I highly respect and admire, Dr. Jim Walsh. Senior Research Associate at MIT, he's one of the few Americans been to not only Iran but DPRK, negotiating nuclear affairs with their officials. Thank you for being here, Dr. Walsh.
It's my pleasure. Happy to be here.
First question is, the U.S. been bombing Iranian nuclear facilities, namely Natanz, Isfahan, and most eyeball-grabbing Fordow. 7 B-2 bombers carrying 14 Gbu-57 bunker buster attacked the fortified uranium enrichment site, hidden at least 60 meters deep in mountains covered by, here I quote President Trump, granite, concrete, and steel. 7 days later, we're still puzzled by conflicting reports. How do you assess the impact of the bombing on Fordow?
There are two questions here, really. One is, what was the impact on Fordow? And then the second is, what impact does that have on Iran's ability to build nuclear weapons? So let's take the narrower question first. What is the likely impact on Fordow? We don't really know because no one has access to the site. The U.S. dropped several of these bunker busters. First time they had been used, the U.S. actually used quite a big share of its total arsenal, but it's the first time the weapon's been used. Presumably it's been tested, but this is the real world, and sometimes things don't go according to the test. But the other thing to keep in mind is that whatever the effectiveness of the bunker buster in trying to burrow deeper to get to the centrifuges in the mountain. It's important to remember that centrifuges are fragile creatures. They break constantly, especially older versions of them. And so it's a delicate machinery. And so it doesn't really require that much to make them inoperable. So I think right now we just don't know. Grossi, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, reported yesterday that he thought the centrifuges, there's a little under 3,000 centrifuges there, were probably destroyed. But that does not answer the question, Iran's nuclear weapons capability today, and what will its policy be going forward? Will they make a decision they had not previously made to now pursue nuclear weapons, having been attacked? And they are both for Fordow and Iran's ability. One of the critical questions is, what happened to the 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium? Because, no one would do this, but you could probably make a crude bomb just with that. It really wouldn't be very usable. But if they have 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, and they had removed it, if they removed it from Fordow, which you'd think they'd probably do after all the threats, and there's other evidence that perhaps indicates that they did, then they have that hidden somewhere. And so their ability to produce nuclear weapons, they would be able to do it very, very quickly. Let's say it takes a year for weaponization, so maybe 2 years, something like that, less than 2 years. Now let's assume instead that this attack was perfect. That is to say, the type of military attack that actually never happens in the real world, where everything goes right. Let's say they got all the centrifuges and all the 60% and 20% enriched uranium. How long would it take them to rebuild? And I'm going to say 2 to 5 years. This is not really accomplishing anything. Why do I say that? They've destroyed all this equipment, right? Well, won't this make it so difficult? No, it's not going to be difficult for them. To begin with, I'm pretty sure they have centrifuges and centrifuge parts in reserve, hidden elsewhere in the country. I think that's a very high likelihood. And let's face it, this is a mature civilian enrichment program. It's been around for 18 years. 18 years ago, the U.S. National Intelligence Community issued an official assessment saying that Iran in 2007 had a technical capability to build the bomb. What was lacking was the political decision to do so. So this is an 18-year-old program. They've built tens of thousands of centrifuges, enriched thousands of kilograms of nuclear material, big program, lots of personnel, you lose, 10, 20 scientists. It does not matter. The results of this attack under perfect conditions is that we've really run the risk now that Iran has done something it hasn't done, which is to say, oh yeah, we'll show you. You've put us in this terrible place. We're going for it. We haven't gone for it for 18 years. For 18 years, we have stayed below that line. Now you've attacked us and we're going to cross the line. If that's the case, and it's probably more than 50-50, and we can discuss why. If that's the case, then they'll have a bomb within 5 years. And the fact that it's 1 year or 2 years or 5 does not really matter.
I've been checking Maxar for like a week, and latest satellite images show Iranian cleaning debris and repairing areas reportedly GPU struck. People been saying like, oh, it's maybe a hull for the centrifuge. Some others, like the DoD, saying they're attacking ventilation shafts. Why would U.S. Air Force dropping bombs on ventilating shafts instead of maybe more important parts?
Well, the reason to go for the shaft is it's an entryway down into the underground facility. So if you start with a shaft that goes down, the missile is going to go through that. So it's that much less concrete, steel, and dirt it has to plow through before it hits some barrier. Then it explodes, and then it creates effects from that point forward.
Well, interestingly, I sent you the NPR article that the correspondent saying using the existing penetration equation, he got the result saying if the bomb dropping on silty clay, it penetrates like 80 meters. But if on medium strength rock, like sedimentary limestone or dolomite, it only penetrates like 8 meters, like 25 feet. Let alone like granite, which Trump been saying is concrete, steel, and granite. How do you comment on his speech together with the equation reported by NPR?
First thing to remember is that if we're trying to answer this specific question, like how far down did it go? Keep in mind two things. One, it was repeated bombing, so it was bunker buster hitting, then the next bunker buster, then the next bunker buster. But again, the other thing to keep in mind is the bomb doesn't have to reach all the way to the bottom in order to have a destructive effect. Because again, these are very fragile, the centrifuge piece of it, they're very fragile pieces of equipment. The way that Israel used to attack Iran's centrifuge facilities was not the centrifuges themselves. And they did this in this last attack too, as to take out the electrical generating facilities that supplied power to the centrifuges, because even cutting off the power abruptly is enough to sort of cause the thing to break down. And once it starts to break down, it rapidly collapses. So, and if you have a centrifuge cascade, and they're all these long tubes that are all together in sets, if one of them starts to go wobbly and, sort of explodes or disassembles, it's going to affect all the others in the cascade that are physically nearby. But I would back it up a little and say, do they still have their 60% highly enriched uranium? The whole deal here, when you're trying to make a nuclear weapon, the most difficult, the most physically challenging part of the entire enterprise is producing fissile material, whether that's highly enriched uranium or plutonium. That is the essence of the bomb. Once you do that, there are other difficult challenges, but they're not nearly as difficult as that. So Iran has mastered the most difficult part of the process and has done it for almost 2 decades. One of the presumptions we should have is there are two things that could happen here. We'll never know what the state of Fordo is because Iran pulls out of IAEA, pulls out of the NPT, kicks out its inspectors, and never lets anyone back in that facility. We just may never know. Under those conditions, my presumption is that the centrifuges were damaged. Maybe some of them survived, but then they'd sort of have to excavate them out of the hole, as it were, and that's, going to be hard. But it doesn't really matter because I'm sure they have centrifuge and centrifuge parts, right? I'm sure they do. That's one scenario where no one knows because no one's let into the facility. But my best guess is there was damage to the centrifuges, to some 50% or more, let's say. They're the only ones with access to the site. So ultimately, they're the only ones who can answer that question. And then the other possibilities, they do let people in. If they moved that 60% enriched material right? Which is what the centrifuges are, just a path to get the material. So they had the material. And if they moved it, then I think they have a strong incentive for saying, well, this whole thing's destroyed. We're going to close it up and never give access again to anyone. And yes, our 60% enriched uranium was also destroyed. That's what I'd say. If I was in their shoes, I would have moved it out. Then if the facility would have been destroyed, then I would say no access. And by the way, all that material is gone. Meanwhile, I would have moved it to a secret facility and started to make nuclear weapons. So those are sort of the choices we're looking at here.
So IEA reports been suggesting they have secret bases. So we all know they have secret one. We have satellite images showing trucks, like 70-something trucks transferring unknown cargo to somewhere unknown. Maybe intelligence know, but there's no leak right now, so we're waiting. Technically, how could they transfer, let's say, 400 kg of uranium? Because I've never been, dealing with any case.
It's not a big deal.
If they're,
I mean, it's
not
denominated into I'm sorry. It's not hard to do. It's denominated into casks, and it's not very radioactive. It's very transportable, and it doesn't really pose safety challenge to people who are carrying it, and it's not going to blow up on its own, in spontaneous fission. So not really a challenge there. I also saw pictures of those trucks. There are different reports about that conga line of convoy trucks that were out in front back on June 13th, whatever it was. Some people say what they were doing was dumping dirt on Fordo to reinforce the barrier, to make it more resistant to a bombing. Some people suggest that they were doing it to be able to transport the enriched uranium they already had, the 60% enriched. I mean, I think it's hard to say. There's no reason why they couldn't be doing both. There's no reason why they couldn't have removed the 60% earlier. On this issue of secret facilities, this came out after the last IAEA board meeting, when I'm sure what the IAEA Board of Governors now regrets in retrospect, when they voted to censure Iran, making it easier for Israel to attack, I think, politically. I don't think they were anticipating that. But in any case, in that run-up to the Israeli strike, when IAEA censured Iran, the head of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, the AEOI, made reference to secret facilities. And Grossi's response was implied that, yeah, they knew there were secret facilities and that one had been under construction for years. Now, one of the big unknowns here in this whole thing is we don't know what Israel bombed, right? They're not telling us everything they bombed, and Iran is not telling us everything they bombed. Now, it is certainly likely that some, like the secret facility referred to by the head of the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, that was one where, again, they were burying it in a mountain, and then there had been years of excavation, right? But, you can store a canister of HEU in an apartment in downtown Tehran, and it would be impossible to find. So I'm sure there are secret facilities that Iran has started, right? Intended to be secret, but not so secret because we already know that they're building them. That's one set. And some of those were probably attacked during the bombing. And there's probably another set of secret facilities that Iran knows about that Israel and the US doesn't know about. There's a lot that favors the hider. There are these models, attacker, hider, that you see in security studies. Who's going to win the race between someone trying to find something? I guess it's really the hunter and the hider. And if Iran is prepared and put its mind to it, and it had months, it had been warning since May, it was taking precautionary actions. If it had time, it would be the hider almost always wins, because you overwhelm the seeker, the hunter, with decoys. And they only have so much intelligence assets, and they can't chase everything, and it sort of gets lost. Like in movies, when someone's trying to make a pickup of a ransom and gets lost in a crowd. The hider has real advantages here. So we don't know. It's early days, but I would say it's more likely than not that they already have enriched material hidden somewhere.
Seems like an endless whack-a-mole game we're now
Exactly.
in.
Exactly.
So many
And,
scholars found technical barrier people been counting on to achieve NPT, like gas centrifuge, not causing that much trouble to Iran or DPRK at all. Like your colleague Professor Scott Kemp argued, the non-proliferation emperor has no clothes. Some suggested counting on public opposition. Actually, NYT, New York Times, got multiple op-eds lambasting the bombing, saying it might weaken Iranian U.S. lovers. So, Dr. Walsh, you've been to Iran and North Korea. What do you have to say here?
First, I know Scott Kemp. He's a colleague and a friend. He may be exaggerating things a bit, but in general, that is to say, it is hard to find centrifuges. It is, because they don't give off a lot of heat and they don't use a lot of electricity. And so there aren't a lot of signals to follow. But in the main, that problem is less difficult under normal conditions. The problem is we're not under normal conditions, right? A country's been attacked. They may be actively seeking to hide and then build a program under intense pressure. So that's not the sort of thing the non-proliferation regime is built for, in part because you're not supposed to go and bomb countries' nuclear facilities, right? This broke like 15 different international laws to do this, humanitarian laws of war and laws regarding nuclear facilities. That's where we're at. And so I guess I'm more worried about this. Do I think the non-proliferation regime, which I support, I don't think anyone should have nuclear weapons, and that includes the nuclear weapon states, and that includes the United States. I think they're a danger to us all, and we're kidding ourselves if we think they'll never be used. And that'll cause a climate disaster that could threaten civilization. So I don't think any of this is good. I got to say, though, my chief worry about this, coming out of this, is someone who spent 20 years on this, has studied nuclear decision-making in Iran in particular, met with the Iranian president every year for 20 years. I feel that, Trump does this, then he goes like this, walks away from it. Look, this was great. Because he's not interested in really results. He doesn't care what happens 5 years from now. He just doesn't want to, he's doing things that he thinks benefits him today. So he'll be gone. But 5 years from now, we'll have a nuclear-armed Israel. Everyone seems to forget that Israel has nuclear weapons and has had them since 1967. We'll have a nuclear-armed Israel, and we're going to have a nuclear-armed Iran. And we're going to be in a much more dangerous world, much more dangerous. Now, that may also have the effect, along with a bunch of other stuff that's happening in the world today, and Trump is contributing to this, a decline in the non-proliferation regime, a decline in arms control, everyone for themselves. And that's going to be a very dangerous place unless, something happens, we do something, someone does something to put us on a different course. That's what I fear, is we're going to have two weapon states in the Middle East who are angry with each other, who are threatening each other. Whatever happens from there is not going to be good.
Well, maybe it's a good news because Iran ambassador to the UN just expressed willingness transferring highly concentrated uranium out of country for yellow cakes in return. Are we talking about staged denuclearization or nuclear disarmament here?
I'm glad you asked this question. Because as we focus like this on the bombing of everything in the last month, it's easy to forget that the choice Israel made, followed by the U.S. to bomb Iran, which I believe may push Iran towards developing nuclear weapons, the politics of it. It didn't have to be that way. For 18 years, that Iran did not act on its nuclear weapons capability, and for a good piece of that, there was an international agreement, an Iran nuclear agreement, and we had lots of inspectors on the ground, and everyone had confidence that people were abiding by their obligations. And every intelligence community in the world, even Israel's, said Iran was following the agreement. And that was great. That put us in a much safer position. Then Trump comes in and tears it up because he didn't do it and he doesn't respect anything that other people do. So he just tore it up, putting us on a path to the military action we saw this month. The ideal situation would be to get back to an agreement. And if Iran wants to negotiate an agreement, the 60% uranium was never a technically challenging thing. In the first, and so, main only Iran nuclear agreement that Trump ripped up, they had highly enriched uranium at 20% and higher levels. And so the agreement said, fine, we'll just blend it down, right? You have whole milk, you pour in some 1%, and you blend it down to 2% milk. That is what we're talking about. This is not technically challenging. The reason, just because 60% enriched uranium is important, does not mean it's technically hard to deal with. It's not hard to deal with at all. You just blend it down, and or you could ship it outside. But I think Iran has always preferred to blend down rather than to ship its own produced material to another country unless it was waste. But if Iran is open to that, man, I would love that. I would welcome an agreement. But there are reasons why I don't think that's going to happen. And that is all those folks who have been saying, let's negotiate, let's not cross the nuclear threshold. All those people sitting in those meetings, they don't have any power anymore. The ones who have been complaining that Iran's being taken advantage of and we need to meet strength with strength and Israel is a bully, all those people who were sitting at the table, minus some of the people who were assassinated, right? Some of their colleagues who would normally be sitting at that decision table are dead, having been assassinated. So they're meeting in a room deciding what to do. Do we go for the bomb or do we continue restraint? Well, I think restraint's going to be a very difficult sell. Very, very difficult sell under conditions where the country was attacked and your colleagues are dead. There's more and more science that shows even regional nuclear conflicts might produce climate changes that could threaten human civilization as we know it. And every day, every country with nuclear weapons says, well, this is helping me today. It's defending me against my enemy. And so I'm not going to let go. And then another day passes and another day passes, and they keep looking to the short term, one day at a time. Well, when you do that, the day comes when there is a nuclear war. And we're talking, 100 years. 100 years from now, who knows who's going to hate who and who's going to be in a conflict with whom. But if we keep doing this, if we keep building, and we're on the verge of building more, and I understand, some people say, well, this country has more than I do, and I have to catch up. I get it. But that is the road to human destruction. And we're seeing it play out in the Middle East right now. But even before that, all the weapon states, France, Israel, Britain, China, India, Pakistan, the United States, they're all part of the problem here. And unless we turn this thing around, we're facing terrible, terrible times. And we can do it. We have success in the past. In the past, we've dismantled tens of thousands of nuclear weapons. All right, it's not a physical problem. We know how to take them apart. We've done it. We've passed major treaties that stopped and restricted nuclear arms. But today, we are moving in a different direction. And if we keep going down this direction, there is trouble ahead. And we have to do something about it now because it only gets harder the longer we wait. And that applies to all the countries that own nuclear weapons today and the ones that may have them tomorrow.
Well, I guess it's tough problem countries that have limited relationships with the international community, like North Korea and states that feel they have made enemies of the superpowers like Iran, and states for which they think their existence is at stake.
Yeah, and I think North Korea is the best example of that. It's the weakest state, vulnerable to, it has a hostile relationship with its major enemy, which is much more powerful. South Korea is much more powerful. I think ultimately North Korea will be the toughest nut to crack of all of them. But if the great powers get in line, if China, Russia, the U.S., Europe, Israel will also be difficult. If they want to take the initiative, then they can create conditions where North Korea sees a way forward that doesn't involve nuclear weapons. The thing is, the big powers are always blaming the little powers and saying, well, you can't have yours, but I get to keep mine. This only works if everyone is serious about trying to reduce the total number. Because the other states, the little states, are going to say, what do you, they're never going to agree, or they'll rarely go along and agree where they put themselves in jeopardy and the others just get to skate by. Either everyone gets serious about this or it doesn't happen.
At least we're doing this to expose fake news populist demagogues feasting on people's fears saying World War III is coming, and laying rock-solid knowledge foundation for fruitful public discussion later. Thank you, Dr. Walsh, again, for your time and brilliant analysis.
Thank you. Happy to be here.